Okay, so we are live now. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to my channel and welcome to this discussion. This is going to be a spectacular one. I can already see that or feel that. I have to mute my YouTube just a minute. Okay. So before we jump right in, I would like to have a round of introduction from our participants today. Pierre, would you like to go first and introduce yourself quickly?
Hi everyone, I'm PL Stuart. I'm the author of the John Kingdom Saga. Thank you so much, Angie, for having me join yourself and all of you esteemed people. I'm just here to talk about the wonderful Curse of the MistWraith, and I'm honored to be here. Janny is a fantastic writer, an iconic writer who everyone needs to read. And yep, I'm just happy to be here.
Blaise, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Blaise from Under the Radar SFF Books blog and also a podcaster. I'm here also to share my love for the Wars of Light and Shadow, Curse of the MistWraiths, Book 1. Been a huge fan of the series ever since I read it over a year ago. Janny is one of the best authors I have ever read. I will always advocate for her stories. I'm just glad to share her work with all of you. Thanks for having me, Angie.
Thank you, Blaise. And last but not the least, we have the honor of having author Janny Wurts with us. And just like Blaise mentioned, she is my favorite author right now. I am halfway through book number 2, and I just cannot put it down. So definitely, she is my newfound, favorite author now. And Janny, quickly over to you for your introduction, and then I can then just give a brief of the book to our viewers, and then we can jump right into our discussion.
I am extremely honored to be here. I have to thank this truly international crowd for being here this morning at all different times, since we've got people up from across the world, and it was a challenge to get a time we could all manage. I want to elucidate that I have read Paul's work, P.L. Stuart, and his mumbling over his title will not suffice. A Drowned Kingdom is phenomenal. It has amazing themes to it that are going to bite in the ass, and definitely check it out. So, and Blaise, I have to hand it to you because you were really the first booktuber who glommed onto this series, and without you, none of this wonderful cascade of shining light on what I've been working on for 5 decades would be happening. So it's really my pleasure to be here. I'm here to answer any questions you may have, because I come at this from many different angles, not just the written word.
Awesome. Thank you, Janny. So to our viewers, so we have Chibi Po here, and she or he, sorry, is wishing good morning from the west coast of the U.S. Do you know the answer? I don't know the real name of Chibi Po, so sorry for that stumble over there. And that he also is mentioning that it's a fantastic Ariton piece in your profile pic, Janny.
Yeah, well, since I can't get the camera running, the least I could do was take you to Athera.
So yeah, that's my favorite currently.
It was done a long time ago, very long time ago. That's in the background. So yep, that's the main character on the left, one of the main characters for you. So yeah, GB Poe would have gotten up before the sun to be here today. West Coast time is definitely, there isn't any air at that hour. It's still dark.
Right. And Kiran from No Breeders is saying hello. And that's me replying. And Paramita, thanks Paramita for joining. Okay, so those are the comments till now. So I would like to give the floor first to PL. PL, you would like to ask any question which will be spoiler free in the first half, because I would like to have a general discussion about the background of the book, the inspirations, the structure, arc, etc. So if you have some general questions, I know you might have had previous conversation with Janny already, or other live discussions, but Feel free to repeat yourself because I wasn't part of it, so it would be nice to get those answers. So if you have some general questions overall regarding the book, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Angie. Just first of all, more of a general comment. We were talking about this a little bit before we started streaming live. There are many fantastic authors out there. However, when I read a Janny Wurts book after I'm finished, I have to take a pause from reading other books because the lushness of the language, the richness of the work, the way Janny writes, it is unlike anything I've ever read. And I find myself spoiled for her reading alone. And I have a hard time sometimes, no matter how fantastic the next book I'm reading by a different author, no matter how great their writing is, I hang over for reading Janny's work because her use, the way she uses words, the way she uses language, it's like nothing else I've ever read. And I crave for reading her books. It's a special treat that I think anyone who wants to read something that will maximize the use of language and bring out, you need to read Janny Wurts' books. So just a quick question for Janny, which I don't believe I've ever asked her. This series, essentially for a lot of us with these spoilers, seems to be set up to compare and contrast two very different approaches to what the concept of ends justify the means, justice, especially like almost two very different perspectives. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of how you, like, that seemed to be the genesis of the series, that you're trying to show us these two princes who have very different concepts about what it means to be just, and about what lengths they'll go to achieve.
If you look at the character's upbringing, one was brought up to rule, and he was really inculcated at a very early age that you sacrifice your personal needs and you take the path that's going to be the most benefit for the many. And the foundational belief that you have to hold in order to make a decision for the many, cutting off everything at both ends, so you're running a middle course, you have to generalize. And I really wanted to point out how dangerous generalizations are and how deeply they erode your critical thinking and how deeply they remove you from empathy. The other character was Ray's match train, and he's a musician, so he's very, very sensitive to disharmony, but his take is completely different. He is going to live in the moment, and he is going to make his decisions in the moment based on what is actually happening in front of him. And that requires no generalization. That requires every nerve end being raw and reacting to the situation exactly as it is. And I think as human beings, we wrestle with which course to take, which one is the right course, which one is the wrong course, because both can make wrong decisions. But the dangers of generalization, or the dangers of not looking at the bigger picture necessarily, being entirely steered by the small. And I think that's one of the things that went into the character makeup here, which I haven't talked about in any of the other live streams. But if you think about that, when you generalize, you become the tool for whatever fits that generality. So you become steered by events because you're going to see those events through that generalization, and anybody coming along to fit that pattern is going to follow you, or anyone who agrees with that pattern is going to do what you told them without questioning. Whereas the viewpoint that goes from in the moment, the minute, the ungeneralized, react to what is in front of you, take the individual who's across from you and listen to them with your whole heart. It's going to be a little harder to twist that and not get off track. I'm not saying either side necessarily is better or worse, but I wanted to expose the pitfalls of having an ideology, sticking to that ideology, never questioning that ideology. When you stop questioning, suddenly you are a force that can be used by a bigger force that matches that ideology. And so many of our wars are fought over that.
Right. That's a brilliant answer. Yeah, I think somehow it also, when you talked about generalization and how we view the story, I remember the prologue, because I am a huge lover of a well-written prologue, and I think this book has one of the best out there. I think because I was reading it in Kindle, and I had highlighted it also. There is this part that we have. It's mostly, there is a saying called, the history is written by the winners, right? So we only most of the time see the winners' perspective of how things played out, and then these sorcerers, I don't know, a bunch of sorcerers, they have this alternative version of history, and maybe that's what we are discovering through these books, and that caught my attention from the prologue itself, and that's the perspective that I'm looking forward as well, that maybe things are not always shown from a winner's perspective, but we get these different kind of perspective, even the inner musings, what people are feeling while acting out some things. And that's what I like about Janny's writing, because it's not plain writing like, okay, he went over and picked up the knife, but you get to see and feel what he was feeling through her writing. And that's what sets this book apart, I think. And you get these different perspectives. I also heard Janny talking about this in one of the discussions in Philip's channel the other day, 3-4 days ago, that that's what you intended for, that, you see a person's perspective, but you only see and understand what he knows, because you're seeing the world from that perspective now. So I really enjoy these mix and match of viewpoints from different characters, and it did confuse me a little bit here and there, but I'm hoping in the future books those will be cleared for me because I don't know sometimes why some characters are doing the things that they are doing, and some of them I'm annoyed, like for example Dakar is an annoying character for me. So I'm hoping that it will turn around and I will get my answers as I progress through the book. Yep.
I think you can't unlock a character's action until you know a certain contour. One is their moral high ground. What is the value that they will not give up? What is the hill that they will die on? And the other one is, what are they running away from? Mm-hmm. And so I don't necessarily reveal those questions immediately, especially not in volume 1. Volume 2 begins to bring out some of it for the characters, but you're not going to know where the factions are coming from. You're not going to know where the worldview is coming from. You're not going to know truly what the 7 are about, the 7 sorcerers are about, until you see worldview in arc 3. So each arc raises the vantage point. So you see more and more and more of where the various motivations are coming from. And that's very much like real life. When you meet people on the street, or you see something on the news, or you see people shaking their fists because they're angry and there's a big riot somewhere, you need to know what the moral high ground is and what they're running from and what the oppression is that's sparking that anger. Where did they feel helpless? You can't understand that because often it's a mosaic of many things. And so this book is designed to expose that. You might hold a moral high ground. It's the best thing, most heroic thing in one set of circumstances. It might make you the absolute villain in another. Same principles, same emotional drive. You haven't deviated from what you believe, but it could be the downfall of what you're actually trying to accomplish in the wrong circumstance. So if you're unable to be fluid and shift your vantage, there's a danger in that too. And this book will absolutely, it will explore that, and it will kick your butt over that.
So we have Johan Herenberg from Netherlands joining us. Hello. There is a non-spoiler question from Paromita. Please tell us about the writing journey of your magnum opus as compared to your other works like standalones and other trilogies.
I think some of the standalones and the other trilogies were practice ground for this, because when I had the idea, I was very, very young. I was just out of high school, just starting college. I did not have the world experience to even write this. So the first thing I did was earn money and go on a shoestring all over the world, everywhere I possibly could. I went to Africa, I went to Russia, I went to Korea, I went to Europe on a shoestring. And I had as many experiences as I could. I went offshore on sailboats. I did this, I did that. I did wilderness experience, so that when I sat down to write this, I would have the platform of reality. And where I didn't, I could research it and fill in the gaps. So I did do a lot of reenacting and checking with reenactors, research. So there was an amazing amount of work going on in the background while I had to learn to write and learn to illustrate, because I wanted the characters to look like I pictured them, not like what the going trend was at the time I started, which was very scantily clad babes and big barbarians swinging swords. This is not that kind of book. So I was learning to draw. So I was tackling about 50 things all at once and writing standalones, writing trilogies, writing this, writing that, so I could have the chops both on the marketplace and also the craft in hand to know what to show and what not to show in this very complex book. I very quickly realized I just didn't have the experience at age 18, 19 years old to accomplish this. So that was what was going on while I was writing the smaller books. And breaking into the illustration field was a lot of design work. And it's different. You know, when you set out to write a standalone, you're pretty much focused on the characters. You're pretty much focused on the plot arc of what happens to them. And everything else is done with mirrors. You're implying the bigger world outside of the very small cast that you're focusing on. And you just kind of fill in the lines with a line here, a line there, that really it's done with mirrors. With a trilogy, you have to know a little bit more. You have to build a map. You have to know a little bit more about the world that you're writing in, a little bit more about the factions, but a large degree is still done with mirrors. When you're doing a long form work, 11 volumes over 5 decades, that's going to take an immense amount of your lifetime to work on, you can't do it with mirrors. You have to build and design on either side of it a lot of structure that will never appear in the books. So that absolutely, when somebody throws me a question, I can answer it because I know this place.
Right. Along that line, so you started writing very early on in your life, like when you were really young. And because I haven't read the rest of the book, I am still midway through book number 2. I have this question. So has your writing evolved as well through these 11 books? I cannot ask the others. Maybe, I don't know, PL, if you have finished the series. But Janny, what do you think from your perspective? Has your writing evolved? And if it did, in what way?
I think Blaise could answer some of that, and then I'll fill in, because Blaise has read a few of the other works.
Yes. So thank you again for having me. Having read the 10 books released by you, Janny, your writing definitely does get better and better with each book. And also your understanding of the language, of the characters, of the settings, and all the other aspects of it becomes a lot more clear. So I definitely think it gets better as you progress in the series as well. And Angie, touch on, you said you don't understand Dakar. He is, I always love him as the comic relief. You'll see as you get more and more into the series. So you'll change your mind on him. I promise you that. So
yeah, I mean, when he started heckling the woman at the pub or the bar, I was so annoyed with him like pinching her and all that, like, such a misogynist pig, I was thinking. So sorry. But yeah, he kind of reminds me of Kruk from Malazan. I don't know, for some reason, maybe the physical appearance and also the behavior a little bit is comparable, I think.
Yeah, Krupp with all thumbs, absolutely all thumbs, and a whole lot of a big salt shaker full of ignorance.
Right. So Paramita says she loved the prologue, and I do not like Dhaka yet either. So yeah, if we are in book 1 and book 2, I think Dhaka is still on the not on the good side.
I have duct tape over my mouth because I know what's coming and I'm not going to spoil a thing. Go on, hate him as much as you want. It's fun to watch you. On an evolution of language, every book that I write has a slightly different style because not all the books I wrote are multi-layered and leveled like this one. Sorcerer's Legacy is pretty straightforward. That's what Ray read that caused him to ask me to write The Empire, and that's a pretty linear story as well. So depending on the story, I have other works which are way more accessible than this series is. So if you're struggling with this series and you want to get a feel for the way I plot things, any of the standalones and the Cycle of Fire trilogy, the Empire trilogy are written linearly. It's more accessible than this. This is off the deep end. I expected actually when I did sell that first volume that I would have a readership that had read those earlier volumes and knew they could trust the stuff I was going to pull at the half point and the ending, because my books are strongest at the ending. I deliver the book at the end. It isn't front loaded and then it kind of peters out. And so the hard part was readers stepping over from the Empire expected the same kind of a linear story, the same kind of an accessible main character. Real people keep things hidden. They have secrets. They don't show you their entire identity on their sleeve. And this book is like that. You might hate a character, but if you don't know their internal workings, if you don't know what they're protecting, if you don't know what damage they're carrying, if you don't know what their moral high ground is, if you don't know what their agenda is, they're going to seem opaque to you. So this book was designed to make you go through that journey of going into the depths of a character, whereas some of my other books, the characters are either definitely inaccessible until you figure them out, but it happens quicker and more linear, or they're very accessible and you don't have to go through that hurdle.
Yeah. I'm not that an expert in judging, or in characterizing books, especially like into character-driven books or plot-driven books. But am I right in saying that it's more plot-driven? But when I'm reading it, initially when I started reading the synopsis and all that before I, wanted to decide, whether I should start the series or not, I assumed that it is a plot-driven book. But when I started reading, I felt conflicted because I felt that I am in a journey with these characters. Yes, the plot is moving, but it's definitely also character driven. So could you clear that for me? Maybe I'm not a literary, or I have not studied literature to dissect books the way other booktubers do. So this is a question to any of three of you, or maybe we can start with Janny herself. Is it a character-driven book or a plot-driven book?
Well, why don't you guys chime in first, and then I'll give you my point of view.
Yeah, PL, go ahead.
Well, I could say I'm certainly no literary expert, but I consider myself a character-driven type reader. But there is no sacrifice of plot in any of Janny's works. You will be captivated by the story, by the storytelling, by the things that happen. But it is very much for me grounded in these two central characters and the auxiliary characters, but these two central characters and the comparing and contrasting of them. To me that's the focus of this series. I've read up to Fugitive Prince, which is technically, depending on the way you work on it, the fourth book in the series. I am utterly captivated by the entire series. I know I'm not even scratching the surface yet. I know I'm just getting in there, but right now for me, this is a book about Lysair versus Arathor, and what they're doing, how they view their conflict, what lengths they're willing to go to achieve either victory or self-preservation, who they're willing to sacrifice, at what cost are they willing to, preserve their own life, and or, it's that for me is the essence of the whole book right now. And there's a lot more. Obviously, there's so many more layers to these. I'm oversimplifying it, but for me, it's all about. So when I listen to what they say, what Blaise here and Erathon say about their conflict with each other, and what they say about each other, what they say about what they need to do next, to move forward. Is it are they utterly single-minded on certain goals, and are they flexible in the things that they're going to do to achieve their ends? Like that's for me, and that's all character based. And as we see what they do and what they're willing to do, as we see who they're willing to sacrifice and what they're willing to sacrifice and how they interact with the people closest to them, especially when they lose some of those people, without spoilers, they're both sides will take losses. Will that galvanize them? Will that deter them from doing certain things, from taking things even a step further to achieve their goals? For me, those are character things associated with characters. So for me, it's a character-driven novel, but that's just my very unexpert. That's just my perception. So, but I'd love to hear what Blaise has to say.
Thanks, BL. For me, it is 100% a character-driven book, and the plot, it just brings everything into focus. The series that this is most often compared to, Malazan, I consider to be more of a plot and world-building type of series, and the characters are just sprinkled around in the background, but they add to the flavor of the plot. This I consider the kind of the opposite. It's the characters and their inner struggles and conflicts with each other, with the surrounding environment, with the fellowship and the Coriani, how they're being influenced, and the themes overall in this book of duty, of free will. How much of their actions are their own? How much of them is being influenced by outside forces? That's constantly a struggle going on throughout the whole series. And also compassion and empathy. That's at the forefront of this series. It weighs heavily on our characters and how they influence their actions and what they need to do. The choices they have to make are heavily influenced by what is right versus what is going to cause them great pain. It's a read I've never experienced before. I don't know if I'll ever experience it again. So it's just one of a kind type of journey. And I am a character driven novel too. For me, the plot just adds depth to it. So characters for me, 100%.
A book that is plot driven focuses on what happens, and the characters are the building blocks that drive the what happens. A character driven book is more internally focused, and you go through what the characters feel and the interactions between them and what their emotions are, and that figures heavily. So if you take a character driven book and you remove all the emotions out, what you end up is almost nothing. If you take a plot book and you take what happens out and you look at the character's emotions and the dynamic of the character relationships is diminished, you have not much left in your hands. I think that I struck to write both. What happens is figurative in this series. It just happens at a slower pace because you're being pulled by the characters' emotions, their feelings, their interactions, their struggles. So it isn't so much what happens, it's why it happens and how it happens. Because the what happens is pretty obvious sometimes, but the how it happens and the why it happens gets very complex and tangled because it is the characters that drive the what happens in the long haul. So this is why I don't worry about a predestiny or a prophecy chucked in there, because that's not the important part. The important part is why it happened and how it happened. And that can get very intricate. So a reader that doesn't have a lot of interest in emotions is going to struggle with this book, because if they're not emotional people in their real life, it might drag them into certain passionate moments of hate or love or whatever the characters are feeling, their conflicts. They're going to be dragged into a territory they really don't want to go. And a person who's reading just for what happens is going to say, why did we waste all the space on these characters' internal struggles? But part of what makes critical thinking work is looking at those internal structures and picking them apart and saying, where are my beliefs driving this? And where is my empathy driving this? And where is what is right driving this? And where is what everybody else believes driving this? And this book, because it's told in an omniscient viewpoint, has the time to pick apart all those threads. So it's an introspective book with very extroverted action happening around these characters. And so depending which way you focus, are you the extrovert that focuses on what happens, or are you interested in the intricacy of the characters? But really it's both. It's both going on. And that's what confuses some readers, because most books focus more strongly one way or the other. So you can't be in a hurry to know what happens. The books will get there, but they're going to take you through the intricacy of the characters making it happen. Why it happens and how it happens is as important as what happens.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you have to have some patience. If somebody wants only to know the story, then this is not the book for you. I think this is something that you take the journey with these two people, and then it's a long haul. And
it's the same thing like Lord of the Rings. If you just strip the plot down, little character takes a dangerous ring and burns it up. Yeah. And an evil guy tries to stop him. I mean, that doesn't encompass the grandeur and the depth of that legendary feel you get by walking through all those archetypes. That Tolkien was so masterfully able to make those archetypes come alive. Those archetypes are as old as time. They're mythic. Mm-hmm. So you can't necessarily, you can boil any book down to the ridiculous. Mm-hmm. It's how the pieces are assembled and whether that meshes with what you want out of a book in this moment, or what your focus is, what's important to you in your life. If a book misses what's important to you in your life, then you're going to walk away saying that book wasn't for me.
Yep, it's true. And I think this is something that I struggle with my friends, when I'm trying to encourage them to start reading. The reason why I started BookTube is because I want to discuss books with people who love books, and I didn't have many in real life. And when I tried, give them a 300-page book, and they're like, it's too much. Just tell me the story in 5 minutes. And in this time of reels and shorts and whatnot, people's attention span is so low, and I'm really worried for the long form content, going forward. But I'm really happy that we have this niche community here, still fighting for, these long form storytelling.
An author has said, and I forget her name, that a story is a gift of experience given to someone else. So for these people that just want the story in 5 minutes, ask them, would you like to live your whole life in 5 days? Birth to death? Mm-hmm. You're getting, in a few hours investment of time, the experience of an entire other lifetime's perspective, boiled down into a story. And I'm not saying that authors write themselves as their characters. They don't, but there's certain facets of their life experience that are going to weave into what was important to them. And you're going to blend that with what was important to you. And the collision is going to give you something else. You won't come out the same. So yeah, that's what I would say to these people who don't read is, do you want to live your life in 5 minutes? All of it? Boil it down to a peanut shell? You'd miss everything. So by not reading a book, you're missing everything. And that's okay. Maybe you prefer to do something else with your free time. But think of the perspective that you gain distilled into a book's pages. It extends you beyond yourself, and you come out bigger.
I'm going to use that in my next discussion with my friends.
Tell me if it works.
Sure. So Paramita is saying she really enjoyed to write Hell's Chasm. I haven't read it yet. Theo, you want to say something about it? You're nodding.
Well, just quickly, I know this is a Curse of the MistWraith discussion, but Troy's Hell's Chasm is essentially one of my top 5 books of all time that I've ever read in
Wow.
my lifetime. And it is certainly, without question, the best standalone novel I've ever read. And again, I don't want to get too much into it because I know we're discussing, Janny's main series. But if you want to read a book that, in the space of, I don't remember the word count, probably about 600 pages ish, that feels like an entire series, with all the layers and the textures but in one book, and with such a compelling main theme, and a character that, his journey, what he deals with, will just wring the emotion out of you. Read that book. That book is outstanding. So,
Just one quick point on Hell's Chasm. I agree with PL. It's the best standalone epic fantasy novel I've read. And if you're watching and you haven't read Curse of the MistWraith yet, or you tried it and then put it down, Hell's Chasm is a great stepping stone into this series. It's a good intro to Janny's writing style, to her prose. You get a feel for her character work. It'll only add to your enjoyment of this series, because you're starting from you're getting a stepping stone into the series, so to speak. You have a leg up on what is it? It's a fantastic book.
Wow, I'm excited for it. Sometime next year, I will get to it.
I think it's important when you look at the long form and the Wars of Light and Shadows to understand that the arc structure had a purpose. And I'm going to talk about it from a different angle than I've talked about it before. I created a nav sheet that you can download off my website. It's just a piece of paper. It gives you the titles in order. It shows you the arc structure, and it gives you a one-line overview. So if you understand the way the arcs graduate into each other, the first arc, which is volume 1, is their cursed destiny will shred the myth of history as written by the victor. So if you think about where you start and where you end up in that book, that is sort of the overarching theme of that book, without going into the particulars, because the passion of the characters is going to rip you to shreds and it's going to get to you. The second arc, their clash of ethics will test the deepest foundations of human morality. So if you think about that as you go through ships, a lot of it, there's room for more humor, there's room for more humanity in the characters, but also that's going to be the grit that's going to kick your butt in the final half of Warhost. If you look at the third arc, bloody ideology will tear apart the world's factions and unmask the pitfalls of prejudice. So if you think about that, belief systems coming into conflict, threaded through these two characters who are opposing each other. So you can see the rings building and the heights and the depths building off of those summaries. And then the fourth arc, fatal ignorance threatens the world's ancient mysteries. How often our ignorance as the human species threatens the very things we need to survive, the very things we need to thrive, the very things we need to collaborate and work with each other. Ignorance is enormous. So if you think of the fourth arc as building the foundation around that, you can see how the rings of what is important are widening. The character cast stays very small, the conflict stays very focused, but these bigger angles are going to play in each of those arcs. And the last arc, I'm not going to tell you because it isn't out yet, but that will bring it all to a head. And that's where the elder powers are going to step in. And the elder powers in this book are there in volume 1. They're right out in the open, but they walk very, very softly. And when you finish the 11th volume and you go back to volume 1, you go, how could I have missed this? But it's right there on the page. I think Blaise is the only one with that perspective at this point in this discussion.
I heard you saying this, and I made a note of it also in the discussion with at Philip's channel. Very great power walks very, very softly, and I was very moved by that. It caught my attention. I wrote it down as well. So I'm very curious to find that out, but it's the last arc, so it'll take a while for me to get there. But yeah, really excited for that. I have like just one complaint while I was starting this book, because I am a huge fan of immersive reading, especially when I started with First Law. I started with immersive reading. That was my first experience. And I wanted to do that for this book. But unfortunately, I was informed by the fans that there is no audiobook available. And and I know that, Janny has done her best in getting the audiobooks out, but then there's been still issues. So what do we do about it, Janny? I know that you had requested into, Philip's discussion that, we should start a hashtag and push HarperCollins and maybe other audiobook creators to, push them and pressurize them to get an audiobook done.
The rights are owned by HarperCollins Voyager in the UK, not the United States. And I found out that even though they should talk to each other, requests for the audiobook coming into HarperCollins Voyager US were not being passed on. So you would have to pass it to, in the US, HarperCollins 360 handles these books, or HarperCollins Voyager UK. They're the ones that are not feeling it's worthwhile to do this. And it doesn't make any sense. The only thing I can say is this series has flown very sadly under the radar for many, many years. So they would be looking at demand, and until they believe that demand is there, it will be harder to shift them. So put pressure on them. And right now you're doing that because you're making the series known. You're making known what is in this series and how we are lucky every time we get books in the fantasy genre that are that deep and that complex and that are capable of carrying so many themes. There aren't a lot when you add up on your hands, and it's getting increasingly hard for any author to publish those because they are so original, they don't follow a trend. This book was written in timeless language. It does not rely on fads. It does not rely on trends. And so it's not going to be the hip thing that everybody's going to talk about terribly readily. In addition, it has a very adult perspective. Right about when people are worried about jobs, when they're raising families, when they're struggling with finances, when their time gets less, these books demand a lot of time and a lot of focus. So we need a lot of focus placed on books that are written for an adult audience, where we're not starting with children as protagonists. We're not simplifying life. We're digging into the complexities of life. So all I can say is I've done everything I could. I want this audio edition more than anybody. I would love for the narrator who did volume 10 to continue because he did a gorgeous job. He had that timeless feel to his voice. Push for it. Push for it. Get readers interested because numbers are going to talk. This is an industry that doesn't pay attention except to what you did last and what your bottom line is. And I think we have 350 even ratings on Goodreads for volume 10. Now look at anything that's come out, even from my closest women peers, they're going to top those numbers by thousands, and I'm not a big one for doing things for the crowd. I really cut my own track on this. So there's nothing to compare it to. It's very hard for a reader to say, oh, if you read this, you'll love that. Because this book has so many facets. It's not Malazan. It's not got those big pulpy, broad stage battles where you don't have to invest much except looking at the carnage. It's like watching a carnage movie with the compassionate thread woven through because he gives you just enough hook into the characters and just enough complexity to the conflict that it becomes almost an exercise in emotional and mental logistics to decipher the Malazan plot. This is different than that. It's got more individualized passion. And it will sweep you away emotionally. If you don't want to be swept away emotionally, then, don't read Robin Hobb, don't read this. So all I can say is demand, 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 make it known. And my plan is when I turn in volume 11 to take HarperCollins' policy of making all their new books into audio editions and fight for getting volume 1 and see if we can prove the demand is there. But what good is volume 1 if we can't get the entire series? So we have to convince them it's worth making the investment, or we have to convince them to let go of the rights. And right now they are not willing. I've tried that. So push for it. These the language was written in a musical style. It lends itself to an audio. It's absolutely beautiful if you hear it spoken. So I would love it. I would love it. But at this point, I'm fighting every bit of credit that I have trying to get it to happen, and I'm seeing a wall. So it's up to the readers to help.
Mm-hmm.
Just on that front, if you've listened to the audiobook for book 10, I think Colin Mace is the narrator. He does a
Yes.
fantastic job. I really, as soon as I heard it, I'm like, oh, he would just kill the rest of the series and do it well. So my experience with this, I started the series January 2021, finished it, and a year later, each review I did, I posted and retweeted to HarperCollins UK. You need to get their attention, constantly hound them into seeing how big of a series this is and the potential that's there. This YouTube live stream, when it's done, retweet it at HarperCollins. Same thing with the other read along that's going. Keep hounding them. Once they see the demand is kicking off, they'll be stupid and ignorant to just ignore it. Getting the series on audiobooks would be fantastic. It'll just expand the scope of the readership that'll be wanting to get into it. But we're doing everything we need to right now. And it's baby steps at a time, but it's going to get there. I have no doubt about it.
We have to shadow a very fortunate glass window. And that is that the Empire series ran out there and did extremely well. And things are going to take the easiest path. So my fight has been to try to market this book differently than the Empire series. And I say it's shattering a glass of good fortune because many readers read the Empire series at a very young age. I've seen readers as young as 12, 13 years old. Oh man, I love this. And older readers too, like in the Empire series. And then they pick up Light and Shadows expecting more or expecting the same thing over again. And it's not that. They hit a wall. And especially if they're young, if they're in their early teens or teens, there are those who are that age that appreciate this. But the ones that really expected another Empire series got very disaffected very quickly and were very quick to review 1 star. And that's okay, because that's where they're coming from. Their experience for their moment in time is entirely valid. I would never criticize them for not working with a book. This book was not written for that demographic. It was not written in the same style as the Empire series. There will be some things that you will see similar to the way things are plotted. You know, you could see my input in the Empire looking back from Light and Shadows. So I guess one of the messages we need to get out there is if you tried this book too young, look at it again. And there are reviews that back that up. Oh my God, I tried this in my late 20s and how did I miss this? Well, because life experience wise, you weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
So that's part of my problem. It isn't that HarperCollins is completely stupid. It's that they pigeonholed and they kept pushing. And every book that came out in the series, I kept pleading, don't box this with the Empire. Yes, there is crossover. Yes, it works sometimes, but this is its own entity and you need to treat it as its own entity and let it flow as its own entity so that it reaches the right readers. And that is what these live stream discussions and AP Canavan's analysis of the prologue, brilliant. Yeah. All of the reviews you guys have done are targeting it to the correct audience. And so we got to battle those 1 stars for when people tried it too young and it just wasn't meant for them. And there's no harm in that and no malice in me. I'm not angry at those people who tried it too young. More power to them if they got through it. But the focus that you tend to have when you're 15 is not the focus that you're going to necessarily need to make it through this series. So if we can get that glass ceiling broken, because it's a fortunate glass ceiling, that's part of what helped me be able to write with no day job all these years to do this series the way it was. So I would never disparage the success. I love the Empire for what it is. This is different. So help me get that message out and maybe we'll start making the connections that'll make it spark. Because there are definitely a demographic of readers who are looking for this kind of books and there are not enough of them.
And you know what, Janny, on that note, you know, I want to make it a personal appeal almost to the people that tuned into this live stream discussion that Angie's marvelously put together, and not so much for the long term stalwart staunch fans of Janny who've been reading her book for years, because there's so many of those. There are, and more for the people who just turned in curiously. Maybe you're followers of Angie's channel. Maybe you're someone who really loves her videos and the content she puts out. Maybe you've heard of Janny, but you're just curious. You're tuning in. For those of you especially who, you look at series such as Wheel of Time and Malazan, and you look at some of these series and you put them up there on a pedestal. You think they're iconic. This is right there with them, and that's something you have to understand when you think about A Song of Ice and Fire and Malazan and these series that people lionize. This series is right there with them, and Janny is also contemporary of the Stephen R. Donaldsons and the George R. Martins. This series began in that same era that these writers were published, and it is exceptional, and it is definitely of that caliber and class and esteem. And so if you haven't read this, you think that you've read, a lot of people talk about you have to read this series in order to be considered well read in this particular genre, right? Most people would arguably say things like J.R. Tolkien and George R. Martin and T.H. White. You pick your authors. But if you have not read Janny Wurts, I would argue that perhaps you're really missing out, and that you may want to rethink whether you consider yourself quote unquote well read in the epic high fantasy genre, because to me she is an imperative to read. Her work is that stunning, it's that brilliant, and it is that iconic, and it is something that until you read it, perhaps you won't understand that, but once you read it, you definitely will. And again, I'm not there yet. I'm only 4 books in, but this is already the greatest fantasy series that I've ever read. So
he's only up to Fugitive Prince, Blaise. You've been through the whole thing, and I kept saying to you when you were sitting at book 1, book 2, book 3, arc 3, oh, you have no idea what's coming. You have absolutely no idea. Give them some perspective, because this is what's going to be so much fun about these discussions. They're starting from ground zero. None of you have read the whole thing. I'm going to sit here with a bushel basket catching the jaws that hit the floor as this thing progresses, because this is going to really flower on the second discussion. Because how many people get Malazan the first shot through? You don't. You can't get all the subtleties on the first shot through. This series is like that. It isn't like that in the same way. You're not going to have the Malazan experience, but the grand themes, the passion, the explosive reveals, the twists that wrench your perspective out of skew and move all the markers. It's going to happen again and again and again. And I have to be very quiet. And so do the reviewers. The reviewers can't review the final books very well, because if they say anything, it will destroy your experience starting at ground zero. So the richness is going to come in hindsight, and it's going to blow your mind, and probably you're going to read it again. So Blaise, what do you think? You've seen the whole thing. Am I full of hyperbole and am I full of shit, frankly, or not?
You are definitely not full of the S word, Janny. Every single book you read in the series going forward, it's going to keep reiterating the strong points that Janny wants you to convey. You'll see many times she'll repeat the important points to you over and over and over again, because it needs to be hammered home in order for the reveal to have that much more of an impact. PL, I envy you, because you're going to be reading Grand Conspiracy for the first time. That book is so dear to my heart. I absolutely love it, and we're going to have a long discussion afterwards about it. But having read the entire series, my jaw hit the floor, I don't know, at least 50 times. And Janny and I were having DM conversations about it, and she's laughing in the background because she knows what's coming, and I had no idea until I actually read it. But coming back and rereading Curse just makes my jaw hit the floor at least 100 times, because I missed so many little subtleties, so many little foreshadowing, that it's just remarkable. There was one section, I think it was just like a couple sentences, like at the end of each chapter, she has like a short 3 paragraphs. One of them was one of them revealed something I never saw, and all of a sudden I realized that is something huge for the series, and I just completely missed it. It's little things like that just made me realize how much of a masterpiece this is. And each book is just going to raise the stakes 100%. So I can't believe you guys are doing this for the first time, and it's just going to be wonderful to see your reactions as we go through this read along.
Blaise, when you finished and you're looking back at book one, I've often said book one, seen from a different life vantage or seen from the perspective of the whole series, has different suspense points. It almost reads like a different story. The tension points are different. What's at stake is different because you see a broader. So did you find that it was a much different dynamic reading through for the second time?
Yes. Reading Curse for the second time after reading the beta for the finale, it just highlights all of the scenes and highlights all what you were trying to build or what you did build in the first one, but you just can't see it. You can't see the high points of the overall arcs of where you're going towards the finale in book one, because obviously you haven't read it, and you have to put the plot points and you have to put the characterization and the language very, very definitively in order for everything to unveil as it does in the finale. So it definitely read like a different book. I loved it even more on the second read than the first time, obviously, but can't wait to read the rest and see what else is gonna be looked upon in a different lens. Just that it's like watching a movie where you think you know what's going to happen, and then all of a sudden there's a plot twist at the end. It makes you rewatch the movie in a different light. That's exactly what this is, except much more dense and much more interwoven. So,
Right. Awesome. Just going through the comments, people are still complaining about Darker, and also, I'm sorry if my pronunciations of these characters are wrong, but I will learn along the way, along with if you correct me, Janny. So Paramita is saying she can tolerate Dakar, but not Lysair. No, yeah.
Well, I have a big comment on that one, and then I'll throw it back to you guys. Lysair, what if you didn't know the other side of the story? What if you didn't see the other picture? What if you never saw Arathon's perspective or anyone else's perspective? How many Lysairs are in your life right now that you don't know the other side, that you didn't question? So I tried to write Lysair so that you did see enough to make you furious, but I want you to have that awakening that there, but for the grace, go I. Because if you did not see the other side, if you did not understand the motivations that drive Arathon, if you're not past the halfway point in MistWraith, you won't have seen that yet. You will just have seen the exterior of a character that's immensely complex inside. Would you have hated him if the book had been written strictly from Lysair's point of view? And if so, if your answer is no, I wouldn't have hated him at all, that's really scary. And in fact, sometimes I have seen reviews of book one where people did not finish or threw it aside because they came in with such a powerfully strong conviction that Lysair was the hero, and then he didn't act that way, that they hated it and they tossed it. They were so disappointed. That was it. That's all she wrote. Bye. We're out of here. And I'm like, good, bucked off another one that isn't willing to flex their viewpoint. So yeah, what happens? Somebody who's very heroic acting, says all the right things, does the heroic speech, looks like the hero, or at least the stereotypical picture of what certain Western civilizations consider to be the hero. Would you have fallen for it? Ask that question honestly. Would you have fallen for it? So yeah, he makes you mad because you are shown there's more complexity here. But what if you weren't? Would you have fallen off the cliff too?
And that's your brilliance, Janny. And again, Janny had referred to AP's Canavan's video, which in which he reads the prologue, and this is a different sort of analysis. And Angie has spoken a lot about the prologue. I wonder if you can indulge me for a second and to do what AP did and quickly just read the prologue, and then I want to quickly talk about Lysair. I'll read it. So The prologue says, the wars of light and shadow were fought during the third age of Ethera, the most troubled and strife-filled era recorded in all of history. At that time, Erathon, called Master of Shadow, battled the Lord of Light through 5 centuries of bloody and bitter conflict. If the canons of the religion founded during that battle are reliable, the Lord of Light was divinity incarnate, and the Master of Shadow, a servant of evil, spinner of dark powers. Temple archives attest, with grandiloquent force, to be the sole arbiters of truth. Yet contrary evidence supports the claim that the Master was unjustly aligned with evil. Fragments of manuscripts survive which expose the entire religion of light as a fraud, and award Erathon the attributes of saint and mystic instead. Because the factual account lay hopelessly entangled between legend and theology, sages in the 7th age meditated upon the ancient past, and recalled through visions the events as they happened. Contrary to all expectation, the conflict did not begin on the council stair of Atara, nor even on the soil of Ethera itself. Instead, the visions started upon the wide oceans of the splinter world, Das and Elam. This is the chronicle the sages recovered. Let each who reads determine the good and the evil for himself. And that's the beautiful prologue of Curse of MistWraith. And to me, that prologue to date, and again, unlike Blaise and unlike Janny, I don't have the perspective of the entire series. But for me so far, this is so much of the genius of Janny's writing, is that, you don't know at so many junctures of this book and so many junctures of the series going forward, if, as Janny said, but for the grace of God, go why, what you would do if you were put in the position of Erathon or Lysier. How would you handle it if these were the resources you had? This was the perspective you had. If you were both in the grip of some magical curse that was driving you towards taking certain actions, but still, how much of those actions are because of the curse driving you, or because of your own free will and your personality traits and the way you've been raised to look at leadership, at power, at mercy, at what's just and right. How much of the things you're doing can be blamed on the curse or be blamed on the person you are? And also, what Janny does so incredibly is she gives us in such great detail, the motivations, the thought processes that go behind the decisions of these two characters, and the emotions they go through as they make decisions that are often tearing them apart. They're not spared. Janny doesn't spare her characters. She doesn't spare them. She makes them suffer and undergo these trials and tribulations and feel every loss. But at the same time, they believe in what they're doing is the right thing. And you as a reader are forced to ask yourself, but is it the right thing? And what would I do if I was in that situation? How was I raised? What would, based on my background and my morals, what would I do? And like Janny said, Lysier does look the part. He does talk the part. He does act and sound the part. And I have to be honest. Yes, if Erathorn's perspective wasn't there, perhaps, I can't say for sure, but perhaps, yes. I mean, I think I'd be cheering for Lysier. I think I might if I didn't have the perspective. And if this book was written as a tale of, the heroics of Lysier, and we never saw Erathon's perspective. We never saw his suffering, his pain, his sensitivity, especially his sensitivity. How would we feel about, this? Because people are convinced, many people are convinced, because of Lysier's brilliance, and solely because of Lysier's brilliance and Lysier's political savvy, his ability to convince, he's very suave, that Erathon is bad. They're not even looking at the facts. They're only looking at Lysier's being what they're holding up as the ideal of a leader. It's his inspiring leadership that makes them think that Erathon is bad. They're not even sometimes looking at the facts. So, I think that's part of Janny's brilliance.
Right, because I also thought that Lysier was going to be hero, and but for me, it was not a disappointment. I like when the author throws surprises at me when I'm reading, and also break the stereotypes. So, and this is particularly that situation, right? You get these characters, and sometimes they do questionable actions, under the influence of curse or not. This is also a conflicting thing which I struggled with last year, because I am ready to give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe 50% of the things that he's doing is because of the influence of the curse. So I don't know. I have to discover more while I'm progressing through the book, but still, I would like to give him the benefit of the doubt, and just reserve some empathy for him as well. But Ariton is my favorite now, because okay, that brings me to my next question. It's about I'm in the middle of book 2, so definitely no spoilers, but we know that he has this affinity towards music. He has this taste of music, Ariton, and also in chapter 5 of book 1, especially, we have this situation where there is this. What was the name of the sword? Alethea.
Alethea.
Yes.
Alethea.
So there is this attack from Khadrim, and he just wields the sword. He doesn't even uses it, but it's the I don't know, the sound or the vibration or the harmony that emits from the sword that actually helps him defeat the Khadrim. So I somehow feel that, and also while I was reading the Reddit threads, I get the clue that music as such is important to Ariton, and I think maybe to the story as well. So, Janny, would you like to say a few words on music and the part music is playing in this series?
Music is signal to the series. Harmony is signal to the series. The magic in the series is contiguous, but it's accessed from 4 or 5 different directions. So there really is one system that drives the magic here. And it isn't terribly complicated. It's actually straight physics. Sound has a frequency. Light has a frequency. Radio waves have a frequency. There are frequencies that are both above the range of our sight and hearing and below. When you take 2 frequencies and you sound them and you add another, it creates another tone, a fourth tone that's beyond what you started with. So anytime you mix 2 frequencies, you end up with another one that's neither the one nor the other, it's in between. So a low note and a high note create harmonics that touch below the sounded frequency and above. So what you're seeing in that sword is a frequency, a very powerful harmonic that is shifting. I mean, you have brain waves. Your brain runs on electromagnetic frequencies. So the harmonics in the sword are so powerful. It can move reality. It can move how your brain works. It can change how it functions. You're not going to see to the bottom of that sword probably until the 5th book, Arc 3. And it's going to drop your jaw, because there's a whole lot more to that sword than is apparent on the surface. And it will come back. So you'll find out in due time. But yeah, I used resonance. Resonant harmonics is a principle of physics. You do not need to get tangled up into it, because the series doesn't matter how the magic works. You can read it just for the intricacies of the characters and the plot and the grander themes. But nonetheless, it was as carefully worked out. And it does tag to our reality in ways that might be startling if you really pull it apart, because it is one system underneath of all of it. Just when we look at our reality, we're limited by our senses, and we're limited by what we can create a machine to see beyond our senses. Well, those harmonics go far beyond that, far, far beyond that. The dimensions that we can access go far beyond space, time, distance. So we're looking at a physics and mathematics through music, through the other accesses, that underscore everything that goes on in the magic on Ethera. And Ethera is a different kind of planet. It has a bigger magnetic core than we do. It's got a stronger magnetic field. It rotates differently. I mean, it's got a different speed than Earth does. So the electromagnetics on Ethera are higher. It's a higher frequency, base frequency on that planet than it is here. And that alters what happens on it. And that's going to unfold very slowly. This is not something you need to know, but it is carefully worked out. It is not just gaming rules shot into the picture at random. I tried to create a system which actually works.
Mm-hmm. So these are the things that we will figure out eventually, not I shouldn't have already done, right? Just
It's
want to
not
be
important. The way the magic runs is not important to the series, and the way that it unfolds as to how it becomes important to the series, it won't be a mystery because you're going to see things from the outside, like that sword working. You're going to see the things, the events in Curse of the MistWraith, when the Fellowship of Seven do some things, and it'll look like you're seeing it from the outside, and you go, oh, yeah, that's interesting. As the series goes by, you'll see those same things at a deeper and deeper level and depth, and you'll understand more and more of what you couldn't possibly see on the first page because the characters didn't know it yet either. So what is important will come out. So it's important that you don't get hung up on, oh my gosh, what did I miss here? You're meant to miss things because they'll unfold in due course. And I hold the cards very close to my chest until the opportune moment to drop it, because I want all the markers to change where you look back and you go, oh my God, I didn't know that. And that changes everything I thought I saw before. So that's why it isn't explained up front. So please let the magic happen on its own. Don't get overly caught up in what you don't know yet, because this isn't a test of your intelligence. It's more of a journey.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Just going through some of the comments. Audiobooks, in my opinion, we have to keep reading the books, physical or ebook, so that the series gains more popularity. Certainly, we should keep doing it.
And for goodness sake, if you've read it and you understood it and you love it, get out there and put up a review and I know it's a pain in the neck to do that, but the more that your opinion reaches the page, the more you're going to attract the right kind of readers, and the more the wrong kind of readers will go find something else they love instead. You're actually going to help pave the way, because this series has not been talked about. So it's lagging in that respect.
Right.
Okay, if the paperbacks are out of stock, tell me where. Tell my publishers where, because frankly, if they let those paperbacks go out of print, they lose it all. It is tied to an in-print press run. If you cannot get the paperbacks and that book is out of print, or you're getting an out-of-print message, I need to know immediately. My email is not a secret, because even the e-writes, everything is tied to that print edition. If they let that go, then that's going to give me leverage. And they wouldn't want to let it go at this point. Are you kidding? With the final book about to put the whole piece together? So, use what power you have. Let it be known.
Right. And Paramita says that physical copies in my region are very difficult, but ebooks are available, so I can read it. So I had this problem with Curse, that the mass market paperback that I wanted to buy was not available. It was the hardcover was so expensive. It's like 18,000 or something. That's like, it doesn't even make sense, that price. I don't know why. So I had to go with the ebook, but from book 2 onwards, strangely, I have all the mass market paperback on Amazon. So for some reason, book 1 is not available, and then I had to buy the Kindle, the ebook version.
Well, maybe you're getting a lot of people to read book 1 and it's temporarily out of stock. The thing is, I need to know, the publisher needs to know, write them and tell them. As far as why is the hardback so expensive, it's long out of print. You're getting a rare copy at this stage. And they did not print a mass or a trade paperback. It never existed. Briefly it did, but that's been out of print too. So really the mass market and the ebook were all they were pushing. Hammer them. Let them know, because market demand is what's going to make them move. And if they don't know you had trouble finding it, then how are they going to know that it's worth pursuing?
Agreed. Yep.
And if I know, I can report back, but I need to know where you are, what place you tried to buy it, and what the message was. Screenshot me the page and I will shoot it to them. Or let me know, exactly which store, what region, what did they tell you? Did they say out of print? Did they say it isn't available? Did they say? So I need that depth of information, because otherwise it's not going to go to the right section of the company to understand what's happening. Many times I'll hear, I can't get this book in the United States, and I'll go back to Britain. They go, oh, we got it in stock, no problem. Well, it means that getting them over to the US part is falling down. So I need to be able to hit the right section of the company to get them to move. And the more voices that they hear, the louder the clamor, the squeaky wheel gets a grease.
I will apologize. I don't want to interrupt. I do have to run though. Please do keep talking, because this is the discussion that's so worth having. Angie, thank you so much for inviting me to this wonderful chat. Please, everyone, check out Angie's channel. She has some fantastic content. She's one of my favorite booktubers, and it's just an honor to be here. Blaise, always a pleasure. Blaise is an incredible person. Underrated books. I can say the same thing as Janny, that Blaise is directly responsible for, I think, a lot of the success I've had with awareness for my series. I owe that to Blaise. He's one of the first, bigger bloggers to really enjoy my work and promote it. So thank you, Blaise. Obviously, I'm very honored. And Janny, again, you're my favorite author. You're iconic. I'm honored to call you friend. People need to read your work and discover your brilliance. And I will read everything you write. God willing, I live long enough, I'm going to read every single thing that you've ever written. And the Wars of Light and Shadow is an iconic series, my favorite series of all time. And please just go in and read it. And we will continue to push awareness, and because this is something that people will be better for reading. So thank you.
Thank you, Pierre, for joining. Really appreciate all your insights.
Yes, thank you. And make sure, if you like books with complex themes and complex moral and flawed characters, and characters who are so tangled into their beliefs that they keep talking themselves out of what they're seeing in front of their eyes. I mean, complexity is the name of the game. You definitely want to read P.L. Stuart's A Drowned Kingdom and sequel, The Last of the Atlanteans. These are the kind of books I crave to read, and there aren't enough of them that really tackle issues in a way that's multifaceted and with nuance.
Thank you so much, Janny. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye-bye now. All the best.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Right, going through some of the comments. Pratik, thanks for joining, Pratik. So Pratik is saying Malazan is definitely on the harder side of understanding. Johan replied saying that funny, I think WOLAS is harder, and I have read everything 10 big books. Yeah, I think I'm also not completely gone through Malazan, only the first 3 books. It was certainly difficult for me, following, because there were so many characters thrown at you. But I think the difficulty level is completely in different dimensions, you can call it. It's different way of difficulty, I think, because in Malazan you are thrown so many characters, and then you are in the middle of a story which is already progressing, and the way WOLAS is written, I think it's a difficult kind of different kind of difficulty, I think, in the sense that you have to have complete attention to the way the story is unfolding, to the way the prose is taking you through the story. So it demands more of your attention even in the way the writing is done, or the style of writing as such. So I think both are difficult, because I found difficulty with Malazan also, but it was the same with WOLAS. But I think, yeah, they are. They stand on their own, I think, both the series. What do you say, Blaise?
It's difficult, because Malazan and Curse of and Wars of Light and Shadow, they're both not easy reads, but for different reasons. Malazan, from Gardens of the Moon, you're thrown right into the battle, and it's pretty much sink or swim from the get-go, and you're trying to piece together all of the the characters, all of the plot threads, the war, which side is the right one, who's on which side, the magic system, so on and so forth. With the Curse of the MistWraiths, it's a lot more like the progression of the story is a lot more linear, and it's easier to follow on that way. But the prose and the complexities of the land, of the family names, of the fellowship, of the Coriani, I feel like I love them both, but for different reasons. I found that Curse, because I'm not a fast reader, but I tend to sometimes my reads, I tend to like kind of like glance over like sentences somewhat. I couldn't do that here. I needed to slow down. It's the first book where I needed to actually slow down my reading. And because of that, it was a little bit more difficult for me to get into Curse, at least at the get-go, once I got used to Janny's writing style. And then once I did, that's it. It was game over. I was hooked for life. So it depends on what type of story and what type of writing style you enjoy. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it demands a lot out of you as a reader, a lot of attention. And if you don't give it, you're going to get bored, or so many things will go over your head, and then you will lose interest. So I think that could be one of the reasons that, people go into this book with completely different expectations, maybe from, not accurate reviews or feedbacks, and then they lose interest because they go in with wrong kind of expectations. And I think that's where this whole fan community really helped me, especially Blaise, your Discord really helped me. And also, I want to give a shout out to Laura Dragonchild, her Reddit thread which she created during her read along in her Reddit channel. That really helped me whenever I had a doubt or question. I used to go through her thread because she had this wonderful, amazing summary. And also the Paravia Wiki. These two resources really helped me. And if any of the viewers are interested, so keep in mind that these resources are available, and this community is there. Blaise's wonderful Discord channel. You can jump in right there, and we all will be there to guide you through this journey. Yeah.
I can add that the Paravia Wiki that was designed by Brian Urey, who's a phenomenal person, just an amazing person. He selectively did the wiki by volume. So if you access the volume you're reading, you should not encounter spoilers. I also recommend Laura Dragonchild's thread on Our Fantasy in Reddit. It's there, it's archived. She did a magnificent job she doesn't spoil anything, but she tells you, watch out for this, pay attention to that. You'll want to remember this point here. And so it shows you how to keep your focus. And yes, I wrote it in a way that you have to slow down, because when your brain slows down, you absorb more detail, you absorb more nuance, and you experience more graphically. So these books were designed to slow your reading down, so that ending sequence just absolutely rips you to bits and kicks you. Not everybody's ready to slow down their reading. We're used to taking things at a very fast pitch, particularly today with so many distractions. So that trips people because they expect they can just skim along or they'll figure it out. The style is going to slow your brain down. It's going to slow your reading speed down, and it's for a reason, and it will reward you richly. But if you're not in the mood to do that, this is not the book for you. It's different from Malazan also in that the Battle of Pale and the opening prologue of Gardens of the Moon, Erickson kind of takes this huge pie and flings you down in the middle of it. And a lot of the threads that occur in that series cross through that Battle of Pale. And you're spending all the rest of the volumes putting together what you're actually seeing. This book is different. Wars of Light and Shadow starts you on a pinpoint viewpoint of what the characters know, which is nothing as far as the world they step into, and expands on it from there. So it's going to be a spiral that will keep crossing over, and it will heighten and deepen what you saw on page 1. So you're not putting together this huge puzzle, and there isn't going to be necessarily a big fascinating battle or campaign on every page or a hero dying on every page. If you think of it as the pie hit the floor and the Battle of Pale, then you had to piece it together. And there have been many in-depth discussions of Malazan, you've got lots of support if you get lost. The Tor.com, the Critical Dragon threads, Philip Chase's channel, there's read-alongs. There's always 2 or 3 read-alongs going on Malazan at once. So you'll have a horde of fans helping you over the bumps. This series is a little bit harder that way, but we do have a Paravia forum. You can go there. We have Blaise's Discord channel going. So there are becoming the resources, but we really have very thin on the ground readers who've been through the whole thing who are able to help the beginning reader who's a little bit lost. So I'm always available. You can email me with questions. I'm not hiding who I am or where I am. And we have lots of resources for the series on my website, on the wiki. And there's been, I think, 2 or 3 archive discussions in depth on Goodreads. So you have to dig a little bit, but we're getting more reader support. It's beginning to happen. So there's another difference. A lot of people wouldn't have made it through necessarily the Erickson type read when they were used to a simpler read without that tremendous base of support helping them out.
Yes, I will link all that in the description once we are done with this discussion.
Oh, brilliant.
So yeah, we can do that. So Paramita is commenting about that she connected with Ariton's compassion and self-control from the very beginning. So I have a question here. So we keep hearing throughout the books, at least 1 and 2, about this Fallon compassion. And I don't know if I missed it, if there is an explanation for that already, and what does that stand for? Like, is it, I just don't get the background of that. Is it that each like Fallon, and then you have the other groups or kingdoms, and each have their own quality, and for Fallon is that compassion, or have I understood it wrongly?
You've understood it correctly. Each royal line has a quality imbued that goes generationally, and it's not necessarily linear. If you have a very big family and there are lots and lots of cousins, that gift will be spread unevenly amongst all of them. And it will tend to cluster on the person that has enough of that quality to begin with. So that's why the Fellowship of 7 determined the succession. There's a reason why each of those royal lines has that quality. The series will unfold how that happened and why it is there. So I don't want to rush it. And in fact, there's a pretty long appendix. It's in Storm Fortress if you buy the commercial books. It was also in Trader's Knot if you get the Misha Merlin hardback edition and trade paper edition, that goes into how the succession works and why it works the way it does and what that family gift really means. Now, with Arathon being the last of the line, and he already has that quality to begin with, the sensitivity that goes with the music, it's going to pile on like gangbusters. Because if there's only one left, it's all going to focus on that one person. So the dynamics of how and why that works are going to come out in the series. And as far as Lysair being an entitled brat, well, how many people that you know that have been privileged since birth have too much empathy for what they haven't experienced? It's one of the problems we're stumbling over immensely right now in our society, as all these forces are clashing often right on the page on Twitter right now. So yeah, he starts out a bit of an entitled brat. What's he going to become? And sometimes you may not even know what he's fully thinking, because you're going to see it from the outside perspective. Almost always wait for arc 4.
Oh, sorry, I missed a comment here. But Arathon and Lysair intrigued me immediately, but I found the story rather elusive. The final third drew me in, though. Then I knew I will continue. Okay.
A lot of people don't realize it, but yes, Curse of the MistWraith is going to start to converge at the half point, and it's going to really accelerate at the 75% mark. And that is typical of my writing and my work. I do endings and they build up. So if you're not sure you want to continue, that's okay. But if you stick with the entire run, you will never forget this book. Because it's going to build on itself, and it's all going to start making sense at the half point, and it's going to accelerate at the 75% mark.
Right. We have Margaret commenting. I have read the whole series, so I don't want to say a lot, but I think it's an amazing series and can't wait for the final book. I'm going to start rereading the series and listening to these chats. That's awesome. And then there are numerous parallels, in my opinion, to a lot of our current political realities around the world. Right.
So how did you two feel reading Curse of the MistWraith the first time when you finally arrived at that 50% mark, that 70% mark, where it all began to make sense and pull together? Because you had to swim through that first 50 yourselves, and you're much closer to that than I am, because I knew where I was taking it the whole time.
Mm-hmm. So for me, so the first 60-70% of the book, I have to admit, I took one whole month to read through it because, like I said, first of all, this was a new way of writing style for me to get accustomed to. And secondly, I'm a non-native speaker, so I take my time to read the book. I'm a slow reader. But once I got to that 70-point mark, and things start accelerating and all these different mad stuff started happening, and then I started getting the answer. It was so rewarding, in fact, definitely rewarding. And also I also understood Lyser's perspective also, why he is doing the way he is doing, because he is not a person who is trained to do all these, and he doesn't even know how to wield the magic. He's done only self-practice, unlike Arithon, right? So I had reached a point there that I could also understand Lysair, even though he was doing, nasty things which I couldn't agree to. I could see why he was doing some things that he was doing, because he was seeing these spoilers, kids being used in this battle, and then he is assuming that Arithon is behind it, and then he does the rest of the things, right? And then the whole massacre and whatever happens thereafter happens. So for me, it was eye-opening. It was rewarding that, I did not DNF it because of all the difficulties that I faced in the first 50% of the book.
For me, and just so I don't spoil anything, are we into the spoiler part of the discussion, Angie?
Yes, please.
Okay. So at the halfway point, around the time when Arithon and Lysair encounter the MistWraith, and then how all that transpires. Well, it's a theme, especially in Curse of Yours, Janny, where you take the light versus dark and you flip them. So immediately we see Lysair beginning to turn. He's infected by this curse, and because of his family lineage of justice as his geese, it kind of amplifies what's going on in his mind and how he's seeing the world around him, and how he feels like Arithon is just the embodiment of evil, and it needs to be done away with. And then from that point forward, where Arithon goes out with Halloran to the clans and to warn them of the upcoming battle, it just builds and builds and builds until the end, where you're ripping the reader's heart out when you give Arithon the choice to end it or to endure the pain due to his compassion and empathy of what's to come. So it's just, I appreciated that when I read the first time. It was like 10 times more impactful upon reading it the second time, because you see all the hints, and you see in between one of the things I loved about the fellowship interactions was it's not so much what they say on the page that matters. It's what they don't say, like written in between the lines. There's a lot of that foreshadowing going on, and the impact of those scenes, I couldn't get over, and I kept telling you about it in the chat. So I loved it the second time around from the midpoint on.
Right.
I think your insight of what the Fellowship don't say is immense, because that's going to rock your world when you realize the scope of what they don't say, or what they give you a pause and they're waiting for you to say and you miss it.
Okay, so regarding the our earlier discussion about the copies not available, Chibibao is saying that, oh, okay, so because Pratik said that the hardcover is like $230 here, and like it's it's ridiculous. So reply is that yeah, Amazon also some are scalping. Looking now, paperback of Fugitive Prince is 60 USD. It seems like some of it is reseller scalping. I see curves for cover price and 2 times for ships onward. Yeah, it varies too much.
Right, my publisher, HarperCollins, Voyager, UK. Hammer them on Twitter. Hammer them everywhere they have a social media account. Get it out there and write them. And if you email me privately, I will forward your email. So just put the information of what your complaint is. I will send it straight where it needs to go. My email is on my website. It's definitely not hidden.
Right. I'm a little bit worried about this comment by Paramita also, that some of the paperbacks are difficult to find in India. Amazon is showing not available. Ebooks are available. So ebooks are available. I'm fine, but still I would like to have the collection on my shelf to be displayed. So if I have difficulties, definitely I will reach out to the publisher or, hashtag or email you or something like that. Definitely, because
the publisher stopped focusing on putting these books on the shelves in bookshops decades ago. I think 2009 was the last effort to have these books on the shelves available in bookshops. And so it's very easy for the publisher to say there's no demand, because there is no demand coming from the retailers. So the more you order from a retailer, or the more you make that "I wish this was here" known, your complaints of not being able to get these books for a reasonable price are silent unless they reach the publisher. So the publisher doesn't know you exist. They're perfectly happy to sell ebooks and not care. So let this frustration be known, because that is going to draw attention, particularly as the last volume gets framed up to go out.
Spoiler questions for question for Curse. How much does Arithon remember his mother?
That question will be answered in Peril's Gate. In other words, it's a significant moment. It's a significant impact on the character. It's a significant point of change for them. And I don't show all my cards. I don't show the broken pieces or the damage necessarily of any character right up front, because you don't know that in real life either. People protect their vulnerabilities. So Peril's Gate is going to absolutely show you that moment, and it's going to show you what it meant and how it felt. And it was signal. So all in its own due time. I will caution you, when you get to Peril's Gate and you read that final sequence, don't hurry, because you will see certain things about this series from an internal viewpoint that you never had before. You will have insight into Arithon's character you never had before. So don't assume that what you're seeing is going to be the same old stuff. Like when Blaise mentioned things get represented, each time a point in the series is represented, it is not a summary of what happened before. It is a new perspective into that event. So you're going to see another facet of that event in a different angle than you saw it when you read the event in the prior volume. So every time I reiterate a scene like that, it is not a summary. There will be an unveiling in that explanation, or that altered hindsight view of that event. And that's one of the things why you can't rush the prose, is you will miss the subtlety of what shifted in that presentation. You'll say, oh, I read that before, and just skip to the next paragraph. Well, you just stepped over one of the little keys that's going to make one of the explosions later be so dynamic.
And Peril's Gate will destroy you like it destroyed me. It's a reason it's probably the best book in the series. So
there's a reason why I had to stop after Peril's Gate and recover emotionally and write Hell's Chasm, and then come back to Traitor's Knot.
Which book number is that? Book number?
It is the midpoint of the series. So it is the middle volume of Arc 5. So let's see. Let's count, because I always thought of Ships and Warhost as one story. So what is that?
It's Peril's Gate is book 6 if you include Ships and Warhost as 2 separate books. If not, it's book 5.
5. Okay.
It's book 6 in the published version right now. So yeah, book 6. So that's the midpoint. That is the turning point of the series. The entire pacing of the plot will pick up much faster after Peril's Gate. There's a reason for it. So if you think of the half point in Curse of the MistWraith, where you had to go through all this stuff, Peril's Gate is that half point. It is that pinnacle, and it's going to really start coming together in ways you can't imagine after Peril's Gate.
Wow. Another spoiler question from Paramita. How much of a dark horse is Elera? She has a greater role to play in the series beyond being a spy or a star-crossed love interest. Am I correct?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally, yes. Her role is absolutely pivotal. If you yanked out any one of the people or the characters in this story, all of it would fall apart. But she is signal. She is absolutely a fulcrum. And you're not going to see it because probably your prejudice is going to stick in the way, because you're going to say, oh, just a star-crossed love interest. No, she is a great deal more than that. And it absolutely shows in volume 1. The Four Ravens event and the encounter with the Fellowship of Seven encapsulate how very important she is, because she is a free thinker. She is a total free thinker. She considers everything she does, and that dynamic is going to play very strongly, ways you have no idea as things are going forward. So don't consider her a minor character. She's every bit as important as any of the others.
Yeah, she is one of my favorite characters as well, I think. From the initial first pages that she appears itself, she is really impressive. And yeah, I really like her history as well, you know, where she comes from. And yeah, one of my favorite characters, Elera.
She has a different set of values. And one of the things that will strike you in that scene where she encounters the Fellowship of Seven is how subtly she's pushed to expand her already expansive thinking. And it terrifies her, because she's getting this gentle nudge to step beyond what she's already stepped beyond, to break the ceiling she's already broken, to break the rules she's already breaking. And there is a lot packed into that scene, and none of those characters are unimportant. And that little old lady, the little old wheezing crone that's sitting in her attic there, don't underestimate her. All that stuff is in there for a reason. There is no window dressing in this series, absolutely none. So a lot of those little details that you say, well, I could have dispensed with that, you're going to find out later in the series, no, nothing could be dispensed with, because I rinsed it out. If it wasn't important, it wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So a question from me. So are Cardans dragons, or are they not?
What can I say that won't spoil? When you hit the ending of Arc 5 or Arc 3, when you hit Storm Fortress, that question will be answered in such a way that I will be picking your jawbone off the floor for about the first time. Blaise, you could speak to that one. I can't say a word.
Well, I'm not going to get into the spoilers of the ending of Arc 3 Storm Fortress, but I will say the answer, you will get your answers in due time. I can promise you that, especially with Storm Fortress. That whole book just wrapped me. It's always a shift between Peril's Gate and Storm Fortress. Which ones are the best in the series? Those two are top 2 of the published ones so far. So you greatly anticipate rereading those. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I get a feeling that, you know, all the questions that we have are things that will be revealed in the future books, and so this is getting more and more intriguing for me, and I'm just dying to get back to the book now. Right. So I also wanted to ask you about the language, the Peruvian language, and I recall from the discussion that you had over at Philip's channel that you created it from scratch, not influenced by any Earth language as such, and maybe a little bit about from you know, Sanskrit. But is it a fully developed language, like how Tolkien did that, or is it just the names and the root words that you have written down?
I am not a linguist, so I did not set out to do what Tolkien did. I could not imagine the depth and intricacy he put into his languages, plural, for Middle-earth, and even the forms of them and how they evolved. So I am not a linguist. I don't make any claim to that kind of prowess. The language is highly developed. I have a lot more on it than reaches the page. I think I did a small analysis of some of the passages of some of the Paravian sentences. You will encounter more of it as the series goes on, and each time it's translated very carefully. And I'm not an expert on Sanskrit, but I know that it's connected spiritually and that it's considered a primary language, and a lot of sacred things are imbued in Sanskrit, from what I can understand from my ignorant Western perspective. Okay, you might know more in depth what I'm talking about. What I did set out to do was create a language of power. So each word has a root word, and that root word gets altered by prefixes and suffixes or compounds of that word. And the prefixes and suffixes have forms that evolve that denote intensity. So there's a diminutive form. There's a form that says it's a little bigger than the diminutive form, a little bit more connected to reality, a little bit. And then there's the emphatic form that raises it past that. And then there's actualized Paravian, which is striking harmonics, which are going to alter reality. So this language, if you took a sentence and you broke it down to its root words, you broke down the prefixes and suffixes, you broke down the compounds and how they blend together, you're going to see a flow of how something is connected to reality, how it's connected to its harmonic, how it's connected to its actual root power, how it's connected to itself, its own name on the scale of reality, its frequency, as it were. So there is an analog code to how Paravian goes together. And if you know the root words and you know the prefix and suffixes and the forms, you can begin to parse what you're reading, the degree of what that word means on the page. This is not something you need to know for the series. There is a partial section in the FAQ on the Aethera website, on the Paravia website. In the frequently asked questions, there's a section on the Paravian language. Careful of spoilers if you go into that FAQ section. I've discussed it on linear discussions on Goodreads where it was all in text. But there hasn't been a real huge publication of a Paravian dictionary or a grand online focus on that because nobody's really demanded it. Very few people ask about the language. This is new. Most readers don't deep dive into it. It's well known Tolkien did all that. I did it my own way. So yeah, there is a progression, a language of power that roots how the Paravian fits together and how it translates. And if I do a breakdown translation of a whole sentence, you'll see that happen. And that is done in the glossary sometimes, that is done online sometimes. You can find it. There's sort of a bread trail, but it's a subject that could certainly be explored deeper.
That's right, because I love doing this. If I love a series, then I would like to dig deeper and deeper into the world and different facets of the world, like the language and the culture and all that. So that's why I asked that question. Paramita has a question. Maybe we are 1 hour 48 minutes into the discussion. Maybe this could be the last question, and then we could wind up because I don't want to hold up too much time from both of you on a Saturday morning. How difficult was it for you to write the ending of Curse? Had a huge emotional impact on me. Is it based on something you saw in real life?
I can come at that from two angles. One is that when I had the idea for this series, it was a very small seed. In fact, I had an outline that's 1 page and pretty much encompassed the entire events, what happens in the entire series, 1 page. And I stayed true to that all these years. Just the nuance evolved as it went. I knew that I was setting up a world that is different than this world here. And even though it looks like, oh, yeah, this is another copy of a medieval European fantasy, no, it's not. You're going to reach a point in the series where you are not in Kansas anymore. But I didn't want to leap you over all those hurdles. So I left the appearance of a classical fantasy in place until I wanted to break the glass and blow the bottom out from under that. So you'll be led down that little primrose path. Just get ready, because you aren't here. You're definitely not here. So in order to make this world what it was, there are certain restrictions in place. There's a reason why this society did not do what human society has done elsewhere, which was explode in all different directions. It followed a different evolutionary path. And there are restrictions due to the world, due to the makeup of the world. And I don't want to go into that. That'll come out in Arc 3. So in order to construct this world with the way this world is made up, I had to research certain things, because certain things will parallel in our society, certain technologies, if you will, but they would have reached a point where on this world they wouldn't go. And there's a reason why they wouldn't go. So I had to take sections of history and research in depth, and then know how to recombine, like sailing ships. They would evolve to a certain point and then they would hit the wall. So how sailing ships would have evolved to, say, 17th century, 18th century, war would have evolved into gunpowder. Then it would have hit a wall. Reason for that, you'll find it in Arc 2. So I had to recombine historical knowledge out of sequence. And as I was doing this research, one of the things I did was research war, battles, tactics, weapons from roughly the Romans up to the Renaissance, past the Renaissance, when gunpowder started making a singular difference in war. So I was reading all kinds of books. I was watching interactors. I was into it up to my eyeballs. And I was definitely starry-eyed youth that I had grown up with history. I had grown up with history books. I had grown up with the news. I had grown up with fantasy books, everything glorifying war. War is the solution. Right is definitely going to win this. At that point, I walked starry-eyed and innocent into a docudrama called Culloden, where the Battle of Culloden Field was reconstructed in stark black and white, reenacted as it actually happened. I walked out of that theater just completely bludgeoned. I think I went through a 3-day crisis of faith, because it took the romantic film, the history is written by the victor, ripped it right off every war I had just studied. And I said, there was no right behind any of this. It was might, or it was luck, or it was a smarter general, or it was any number of ridiculously complex factors that created the history that we have romanticized. And nowhere worse than Bonnie Prince Charlie and the Scottish Risings, which were bloody and horrible. And if you look at the actual historical fact, the Battle of Culloden was freezing cold, freezing rain. These guys were starving. They were being driven by their lords. They were forced to be there, and they were forced to march into cannon fire where nobody gave the command to counterattack. So cannon fire just ripped their ranks to shreds. It was such a bloody debacle, and it ended an entire way of life. It forever changed the course of history, not just in Scotland, but here, because that ripple cast outward through colonialism. So I made the decision, this book is not going to glorify war. Fantasy is the worst offender, the big battle that definitely knocks down the evil or the whatever that's not us, the other. So I said, I'm going to destroy that illusion right now, because our news, our history books, our telling of myth blunts that this kind of horror happens over and over. And the point at which these problems could be addressed happened long before the breaking point of when a war breaks out. It's because we've ignored the signals for decades, just deafened our ears and kept on marching straight forward until we have no other way to go but a mess. So that led to it. that definitely led to it. As far as when I was writing that battle, I reached a certain point in that narrative where I said, this is what has to happen. And I didn't see the depth of the horror of what had to happen on that page till I was actually on the point of writing it. And I sat down in the chair and I shook and I cried, because I said, if I write this the way it has to be written, I have just taken an Uzi and shot my foot so many times. There goes my career straight down. Or I've committed the single act of genius that's going to put the series on the map. And I had to choose, am I going to have the courage to go forward and do this on the page and gut you and show you absolutely hands down, there is no solution for war? Or am I going to chicken out and sugarcoat it? And I chose to step off the brink. And you guys will be the arbiters. History will be the arbiters. This series will either stand or fall. But I couldn't stand back from that, because I said, if I'm going to stay true to the fact that I'm not going to sugarcoat what our history has done to us over and over and over, then I have to go forward and write that final battle as it is written and published today.
Wow, that was a great answer, really.
There are no
And,
holds barred in this series. I did not pull my punches anywhere, not in the complexity, not in the language, there were no compromises made to how the plot was delivered. There's a purpose to all of it. And if it doesn't agree with you, well, you know what? You don't get anywhere without taking chances. The right people will find this. And I regret nothing, because this was the one work where I did not pull my punches. I laid it out exactly how I wanted to.
that's great.
Incredibly powerful.
Yes. Blaise, any final questions, final words?
Just final thoughts on my reading of Curse of the MistWraiths. It is hands down the gateway to the larger world of the Wars of Light and Shadow. It is the pinnacle of what a great epic fantasy book can show you. It goes into the deep, dark corners of not only what the genre has to offer, but also human reality, human emotions, the shortcomings that we have as people, whether emotionally, politically, ambitiously, spiritually. It all is in this story. This book particularly, and then the rest of the series, you'll see how it unfolds. By finishing Curse of the MistWraiths, you're gonna feel an emotional impact. By finishing the series, your whole way of looking at different aspects of reading, language, and human interaction will be changed forever. It changed my way of looking at things in my own life as well. I can't thank Janny enough for showing me this. It has that much of an impact on me, and the series will forever be in my top 1 or 2. Like, it'll never change. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and this is going to be a fun journey.
I don't want people to get hung up on the dark and the depths. This is not a grimdark series. In our world, we have the people who are absolutely beyond the pale, reprehensible, and do terrible things. I know. I volunteer for search and rescue. I've seen things and heard things that you could not imagine. But we also have our Mother Teresa's. We also have the heroes that rise above. We also have those people who seem so unassuming that have such a huge impact. For every dark corner, we have an incredible capacity for light. And if you read this series, I don't flinch from the light side either. It is absolutely always there. For every depth in this series, there will be a counterweight scene that lifts it. So it is not a hopeless series. It is not a series that just looks at the cynical side. To me, cynicism is the enemy. It's when you stop trying, when you stop believing that hope is even possible. And it's when you stop fighting the loss of hope. So this series will it will deliver the light side. It is a full spectrum read. It is not fluff. It is not sugar, but neither is it all dark, gray, grim, gritty, with no morals or lack of morals. It does what the best epics do. If you ever read the Odyssey, what brought Odysseus home was his faith to his wife, his love for his wife brought him home. But in the course of that journey, he broke every single principle of faith with his wife that he possibly could. Every single one, every single moral high ground he had was shattered. And in the end, that defined what that moral ground really meant and why you fought for it and why you stuck to it and why you continued to hold that faith and keep that love and keep that light that brought you home. This series will do that. It may smash things into a million pieces, but it's not going to leave you there. It's going to redefine why that principle was important in the first place and why the next time around you might just die on that hill.
Thank you, Janny. We have a couple of more comments. I just want to go through that. We have Scarlet Cloak joining us and loved the first book. The initial chapters were slow but full of world building. It all ramped up after the 12th chapter, and the final 2 chapters were the best. Shall definitely read the next books. Shibibo, no grimdark here. It goes to some dark places at times, but equally soars to amazing heights. Awesome. For me, my experience with Curse was that, of course, like Scarlet Cloak mentioned in the beginning, it was kind of slow. It did, yeah, and I also mentioned it took time for me to find the right rhythm for the book. And once I found that, then I just blended in and I was with these 2 characters right there with them, experiencing them. And for me also, for me, plot is also important. I'm a plot-driven reader, you can say, but for me in this, I strongly felt that it is also character-driven because we feel what these characters feel, and we just see not just these 2 characters, but even Elera, we see what she is thinking and how she is feeling about people around her. So it's like we will get the perspective of multiple people. And for me, that also is kind of, a mix of both plot-driven and character-driven. And it's really, really elevated my experiences because, like Janny said, by the end of book 1, I realized that whatever I thought was excess while I was starting this book, I think this book wouldn't have been that if not for those, things that I dismissed as excess, or things that should have been edited out. And I realized how wrong I was. So for me, this was a slow beginning, but then an amazing end, and I just couldn't stop myself from picking up book number 2, and I'm binging on book number 2, like I mentioned. Janny, I cannot thank you enough for writing this book and, persevering through all the hardships and obstacles that you face along the way with the publishing, with the writing and everything. So we all are thankful to you, that you kept on writing.
I will add a little bit to what you said. There are books that are written in such a way that the main character is transparent so that you overlay your emotions and feelings. So the main characters are written very minimalistically. So you're free to interpret and feel good about superimposing your own thoughts and beliefs on top of the character in a book. These are great escape reads. I love them too. I need moments when I got to get out of stress too, and I don't want to be challenged to step outside of myself. War of Light and Shadows is not that. The detail and depth of each character's emotion is going to be written in very strongly, so you can't avoid feeling what those characters feel. And it may not be what you would have felt in the same circumstance, so it may just rough your hair a little bit or run against the grain. But that is where the payoff comes, is you see all the intricacies in those characters that make them do what they do and why they do what they do. And what happens to them is going to strike that much harder because you will actually have to step into their shoes. So this is a book that's going to compel you to feel what somebody else felt, whether you want to or not. Sink or swim, you are going to feel what that character felt, and it's not necessarily what you would feel as an individual. So if you're unable to make that separation, it will be harder for you. So if you understand that you're going to have to wear that character's shoes in every way for real, that will make the experience come alive to you. Also, if you're one of those people that has aphantasia, you can't visualize, these stories are written very visually. So the visual descriptions are very intense and they're very much important to the story. So a person that cannot visualize may struggle and feel, why is this here? It feels like window dressing. And for that, I can only apologize. This wasn't written for that difficulty. But if you understand that if you wait, some of those things are going to start to trickle through. Sometimes, at some point, it's going to start to click for you. So you have to kind of let it flow, to the point where somebody wrote me a fan letter once and said, I had a friend who was blind and you taught me how to describe what I'm seeing.
Oh, wow. That's high praise.
So I'm just telling people that if you have that inability to visualize when you read, then don't apologize for the fact this book will be difficult for you, because it will be. I'm a visual artist. I put the kitchen sink and everything on that page because I wanted the entire breadth of the experience to trickle through your pores. Gift of an experience given to someone else. You're going to see that world like an artist would see it.
Yeah, that's another thing, the artwork on the book covers are brilliant, amazing. And I just wish we get more, I don't know, artwork from this world from you, Janny, hopefully.
There's a lot of it. It's just waiting for a chance to get published.
We are waiting for it. I hope it works out. There's a quick question from Scarlet Cloak. In the Conquest chapter, the MistWraith affects Lysair, thus leading to his fixation with the Justice Geese and taking down his half-brother. In the last couple of chapters, Arithon mentions that he is cursed to fight his brother too, and we can see the MistWraith's influence on him for a moment. I might have missed it, but did MistWraith affect Arithon somehow? And I think in the chat itself, some Shivibo has answered. During the chapter Coronation Day is where you'll find the answer, where Lysair publicly denounces and strikes at Arithon. Janny, you want to add something here?
Yeah, I'll say that you don't know the whole story yet, not by a long shot. And it will come out absolutely, unequivocally come out. Did the MistWraith affect Arithon? You will see him thrash over this question, but Peril's Gate will totally blow your world apart, because that will be answered in depth. And remember, I said that little events are going to circle around and you're going to come back to them and you're going to see them from a bigger perspective, and it's going to shift the markers of what you thought you saw in the first volume, the second volume, all of it. Peril's Gate will be that moment where that question is answered. So the card will drop at exactly the right moment. It will gut you, and it will drop at exactly the right moment. But it wouldn't work if I dropped it in too soon.
That goes all the way to the finale as well.
Yes.
I promise you that. It does.
Yeah, you won't have seen it all. You won't have seen it all by Peril's Gate, not by a long, long shot. It will be terrifying when you read the final volume. Be prepared. You better seatbelt in and put lead weights in your shoes, because you have no idea.
Wow. Okay, so I think we are at the end of our discussion. So Blaise, you had shared your final thoughts on Curse. Janny, you want to say some final words to round up the conversation here?
Thank you to everyone who came today to listen to this at whatever crazy hour. I can't imagine getting up while it's still dark on the West Coast. I can't imagine trying to match time all the way to India. Every one of you is an amazing human being, because this book demands that you see other perspectives. And not everyone has that willingness and that capability or that strength of character to actually bend their perspective and step out of their own shoes. So I have never met a reader who completed this series or who read these books who absolutely connected with them that wasn't someone I could respect. So my hat's off to every one of you, because I know what it demanded of me to write it. walking into it cold with no clue what's coming and staying the course. You are all incredible human beings, and thank you for being here. You make this planet a better place.
Thank you, Janny, for those kind words. We are all happy that you wrote this book, and after listening to all the hardships that you have endured to, get these books completed, I have only respect for you and high praises for the amazing books that you have written. I am looking forward to reading completing book number 2 and having our second discussion very soon in this channel. In the meanwhile, as promised, we will, as fans of this book series, will try to push the publishers and get the books in the bookshelves and also the audiobooks as well. We will do our best from the fan community. Thanks for joining, all of you, all the viewers, and Blaise, special thanks to you, especially for allowing me to use your Discord for my read along, because I am so overwhelmed by Discords. So I try to pick and choose whichever I am part of. So thanks for your kindness, and we're looking forward to more interesting discussion in your Discord for ships as well in the coming days. And thanks both of you for joining. Too excited to get back to ships, and looking forward to our next discussion.
Can't wait for ships.
Joining.
Yeah, well, yes. Angie, you're going to want to have Warhost right at your elbow when you finish ships. It has a nice pause point, but ships and Warhost were designed to be one story. And when you read ships, that if you think of that as half point to midpoint of Curse of the MistWraith, the cascade is all in Warhost, the finale. So those two really belong to be read together if you can find the time. And a lot of readers that read ships and then kind of pause there, well, you miss the most rich part of it, because the convergency all happens in Warhost.
Definitely, I will pick it up right after ships. Yes. So thank you both of you. Thanks for joining. So we will talk soon.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you for hosting, Angie.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.